Okay, welcome to Visual Basic. This should be a day one. Let's get started and get our feet wet. I want you guys to get into this environment pretty quickly. Some of you may not know anything about programming. Some of you may bring a lot of knowledge and know that this is something you're into, but I really want you to kind of get immersed in this environment quickly so you get a feel for, hey, this might be something I really want to do. This is an elective course for most of you. So if there's a photography class or a graphic arts class or something that you were debating between or taking a guitar course or something else, maybe you can, and you find out, hey, this isn't for me, maybe you can make that switch. Hopefully everyone enjoys this, but it most definitely is not for everybody. So anyway, our goals on this video, I'm going to go through things pretty quickly here, but you can always pause and come back to this. And our goals, as far as this course is concerned, you have to have a specific file structure where I can get in and grade things. I want to take you into the Visual Basic environment, show you how to get in there, get some terminology out of the way, and then we're going to just talk about two or three common what are called tools or common controls, properties, and an introduction to code, how we make things happen in a Visual Basic environment. So that's what we're going to be looking at over the next several minutes, and welcome. So first thing you're going to do for this course is we're going to create a file structure in your iDrive. So you will navigate to your iDrive, and on the very top level, you will insert a new folder. If you don't know how to do that, certainly someone around you can help, or we can come around and help you with that as well. So you're going to create a folder that is called Visual Basic. And I've got one on a desktop. I'm doing this from my home computer, and therefore I'm not going to an iDrive. But you're going to create a Visual Basic folder at the very top level. That is the only place in this course where when I look for your assignments to grade, that's the only place I will look. I'm not going to go rummaging through your file system looking for things. That responsibility is on you. So in the Visual Basic folder, once you have it created, you'll see I have a few folders created here, but I'm going to go ahead and redo that. Once you have the Visual Basic folder created, you're going to just right click or create a new folder, and you're going to create 8 of those for now. And I'm not going to do all of them, but chapter 1, you're going to have a new folder. Chapter 2, and you can abbreviate like this, that's fine. A new folder, you're going to create all of them, but I'm just going to stop through chapter 8. So you'll have 8 folders, and we may add other folders to that at some time in this course. Okay, so once that is done, we want to go ahead and talk about the Visual Basic environment. So for you to get to Visual Basic through your ZenWorks window, when you log on, that little window that comes up and you've got some different options, one of those options will be folder view, and you'll go into folder view, and one of the folders will be Microsoft. And within Microsoft, if you open it, you're going to find Microsoft Visual Basic or Microsoft Visual Studio, which will contain Microsoft Visual Basic. So this is what we are looking for. By the way, this program, this Visual Basic 2010 Express, is a free download on the internet, so you can have this on your home. Although if you're using your class time and you're present and you're not falling behind, that would be very, very minimal if you were interested in. That would really mostly be for those who are just interested in working ahead. So Microsoft Visual Basic, let's take a look. It will not open this quickly on your school computer. Let me recenter that a little bit for you here. Okay, so that is our environment when we open, and you'll see some things that we've got. We got the opportunity to create a new project, open a project. This should be of some interest to you. We're going to be able to, and we'll look at this at some point in a week or two, just kind of as motivation factor. We've got to get our feet wet in this, but it's a Visual Basic is a very powerful program that we can advance pretty quickly, and we can create things like Space Invaders games, and there'll be some really good games created within this course. Typically, you'll either be opening a project or you'll be creating a new project. In this case, we're going to go in as though we were creating a new project. And when I click on New Project, I'm given some options here. And the default option, Windows Form Application, is possibly what the only thing anyone in here will ever do. Some of these others are worth looking into. I honestly don't know a whole lot about a lot of these others. This is an introduction to Visual Basic Programming, and we can do a ton of things with Windows Forms applications. So I'm going to select it and click OK. Now, typically when the program opens, it's going to look like this. So here is a form, and we're going to need to be familiar with the form. We're going to need to be familiar with the toolbox as I float over. And this is our Solution Explorer over in here, which allows us to switch back and forth between code, and sometimes we'll have multiple forms. I'm like, if I go click this guy, view code, right now, all I have is this public class, form 1, end class. We'll certainly be talking about that more in the future. And I can switch back to design, but you'll also notice I can do that on tabs up here. Right now, this is a huge deal for us. This properties, this is form 1, and it has properties. And I look, and some of those kind of make sense to me. Some I don't have any idea what it's going to do. But if I look at, for instance, back color, right now, control is the default. If I click active caption, there's my back color of my form. Right now, for instance, down here, we've got size 300, 300. What if I make that 500, 300? Oh, I see what that's doing. Maybe 500, 450. All right, I got an idea what's going on there with that. Now, I go for, oh, I didn't do 450 there, did I? I meant to do 450. I don't know how that happened. Try that again. Okay, there's 450. Now, I can also just resize it this way. Now, I'm going to release this, and I want you to look over here at size in the properties window. I'm going to release it in 3, 2, 1. So we have some control over that as well. All right, I'm going to go back up to, just because I'm so used to it, change the back color to control. That's just kind of our little non-intrusive gray back color. Maybe shrink this down a little bit. And we're going to just create a program now using some tools, because it's called Toolbox. I call them tools often, but they're also called controls. And because we're going to go into this toolbox so often when we're in design mode, that's what we're doing now. We're designing a program. That I'm going to go ahead and thumbtack this right here. So now it's just there. I can go back and forth between, and to be honest, it's a great way to do this because we just drag objects onto here. So some of these objects are things that'll make complete sense to you, like a button. We know exactly what a button's going to look like. I'm going to put a button on here, and there's a button. Now, partially just because I like to, but partially for the sake of the viewer, this is a video. I want this to be very clear so you can see it. First thing I'm going to do on that button is I'm going to come over and I'm going to change its font. Now, before I do that, notice I click on form, and this is the form's properties. I click on the button. Now we're in the buttons properties. I'm going to change the buttons font, and I'm just going to make it bigger. I'm going to change it to 22. And you notice it did not auto size, so I'm just stretch it out just exactly what you would think it would be. And we have this. Now, that was the first thing I did here. That truthfully is not the first thing I should do when I put an object on a form, but we'll come back to that in a bit. Okay, so there's a button. If I run the program up here, and I float over that button, it's kind of just prompting me, hey, you might want to click me, and I click, and of course nothing happens. We haven't told it to do anything. And us thinking we want it to do something won't do it. We're going to have to get in there, get our hands dirty, and tell it what we want to do. Okay, so let's look at some other things that we may recognize. Checkboxes, you've seen those on internet forums all the time. We've got some other things may make some sense to you, but here's a label. And labels are very common to put on. So I'm just going to drag up here, and you'll see my label says label 1. And maybe I don't want my label to say label 1. So I look around here, and I see that, well, there's label 1, the text. The text is label 1. If I drag further down there, I see, oh, the name of it's label 1. What if I didn't want this to say label 1? I could try this. this is my favorite. I'm just going to put, I wonder. And when I click off of there, label 1 still says label 1, but label 1 is no longer really label 1. I didn't change the text of it. I changed the name of it. I'm going to change the name of it back to label 1 for right now, even though we're going to talk about that again. I'm going to change its text property to welcome. And when I click off of that, well, there we go. I think I'll change its font size as well. So these are just all of the things. And you want to get your hands dirty. You want to get in here and play around with this. You want to try changing its back color. There's even images. You can put an image behind this, so some saved picture that you have. There's all sorts of things. I don't know what all of these do, and that's why one of the things I like about this course is students will get in there, they'll do something, and I'll get to ask, hey, what did you do what property allowed you to do this? Well, right now I'm just going to change its font. You've seen things like this before. I'm just going to change its font to 22 as well. That seems to be big. And that did auto size. So you see a button didn't auto size, the label did. So there's some little quirks, things that you'll get used to. Take a look. Let's look at one other thing here. I still have label 1 selected. I'm going to look at its border style. Right now there is no border. I can have a fixed single. Oh, okay, so now it looks like that. Or some people like this one. I kind of like this at times. A fixed 3D, and it looks like it's kind of indented. Okay, so what my goal might be, I might want to, if I run this, nope, don't want to do that. I'm going to go back in here. Ignore what you're seeing right now. Go back here. Let's run this guy. I'm having had this happen on my home computer before. Okay, that was a challenge that I've had on my home computer with this. We will not have this challenge at school. So anyway, if I was to run this program right now and click button 1, and I wanted this welcome sign this welcome to say hello, it's not going to do that because I haven't told it to. So what I would like to do is create code associated with this button that affects the text associated with label 1. I don't want it to say welcome anymore. I want to hit the button and affect this property right here. So I want label 1's text property to become hello. So to get in there to do this, the simple way to do this, it's this that I want to use to affect that. I'm going to double click this button, and it creates this little place for button 1 to have code. And I can go back and forth between the two. Here's to go to form, this guy, view code, view designer, view code, or simple enough, just worksheet tabs. View the code, that's our form 1's VB, and here's form 1 VB Visual Basic design. Here's where we design it, here's where we code it. So I didn't have to type this stuff in. It knew to do it. When I created the program, it knew to create a public class form 1. It's not important you understand what all that does for us right now. But let's make some sense out of this. Private sub, button 1, click. Maybe I don't know what all that does in here right now. Maybe I don't know what all of this in here means. But I do know when I click button 1, I want what? I want label 1's text to change. So I want to start talking about label 1's text. So I'm going to go back into code, and I'm going to start typing label 1, and you see it tries to prompt and help me, and I could double click that, or I could type in label 1. Very important, to get to label 1's property, you hit period. Now, take a look. Let's go back to our form for a second. This guy has a property. We're just going to look at a couple. It has a back color, and it has a cursor property. Let's go back into code. And when I retype in that period, take a look. Amongst all these options, there's back color. And there is cursor. So the properties that are back associated with label 1, you access them or you talk about them in your code after the period. And the one we want to affect is its text property. And we want its text property to be equal to, let's say, hello. And I put that in quotes. We'll talk about why we put text in quotes later versus this is an object. This is text we want to put on there. So this is really just a variable name assigned to that object on the form. So let's give this a try. So I run this, and here's my program. Looks like this. Float over the button. If I click on welcome, nothing happens. Click on the button, it tells me hello. If I click on the button again, it still tells me hello. Maybe I want to add a button for telling me goodbye when I'm done with that. So let's stop the program. Let's go back into our form and let's add another button. Now I could add another button, drag it on, or maybe I want one that's the same size as this. So I'm going to right click this, copy, click on the form, right click, paste. So now I've got a button 2 that I want to affect, I use to affect this label 1. So how do I do that? Double click button 2. It does all this for me. And now I'm just going to steal from myself. I still want to, I'm copying, pasting. I still want to affect label 1's text, but I want it to say goodbye. Make sense? So let's run this. Run this. Hit button 1, hit button 1, still hello, but button 2, goodbye. Pretty simple, and hopefully the biggie there that you take from that is to get to the properties, we use .text. Okay, we use the name of the object. Now, let's imagine for a second that we were creating a program that had 30 buttons and 60 labels on it. I don't think, and let's say I'm looking down, this is kind of neat over here. You can see all of your objects or all of your controls over here. But if it says button 1, let's say it said button 35, and that was button 35 out of 60 buttons. I might not know what button 35 does. Here is a habit you must get into, and I didn't do it just for the purpose of illustrating this. When you put an object or a control, a tool on the form, you need to give it an appropriate name. So what is button 1 doing for it? It's telling the label to become hello. So I should have planned that, and instead of having this be called button 1, I should have named this guy, its name, not its text. I should name that, and here is a naming convention. I'm going to call it hello button, and I don't need the 1 after it. You could have it there, but hello button. That makes it pretty darn obvious when I look in this list up here now, oh, the hello button, that's this guy. Now what doesn't make sense is that the text of this is button 1. When do you open up a form and see something that the text says button 1? And so I'm going to change the text of this to something more appropriate. Let's call it greetings. Greetings. And that just changes its text. Have to make it a little bit bigger. And I'm going to go into button 2. I named this one hello button. I named this one button 2. I'm going to name it goodbye button. I'm going to change its text to farewell, but I'm going to change its name to something that makes a lot of sense to me here, and that is goodbye button. Now, this is called naming conventions. When we name, you got to understand, a really big part of programming in all languages, Visual Basic included, is that we all live in one universe, and good programmers become good thieves. They find chunks of program from other people and they incorporate into that. Imagine you had a program where you wanted to shuffle a deck of cards, and somebody has a little subroutine that they've already written for that. Everybody's going to use pretty much the same language so we can all communicate. So the naming convention is whatever the object is, and this one is a button. It's going to end with that word. It's a button. This one ultimately, when I rename it, is going to end with label. But it's going to start with something that makes sense in terms of what that button does. So goodbye. Notice the capitalization is part of the convention. If it's a new word, it's capitalized. You won't put any spaces in these. So here, hello button. This one should perhaps be You know, these are basically all greetings. So maybe I'll take the name of this, not its text, and I will just call that greeting label. Okay, let's take a look at our code now and see what happened there. In our code, notice greeting label, it knew to change that because that was just label 1 before. Button 1, it didn't change that, but this says handles hello button. So when we click the hello button, it gets handled here, or you can think of it this way, a handle in like CB jargon, Citizens Band Radio, a handle is like your nickname. So button 1 could be nicknamed hello button. Hello button is button 1's handle. It's its name. Okay. Likewise, goodbye button is what was button 2. Now I want to show you something that would be helpful had I done. Let's say I put this button on here and I just call this guy its name. I'm going to call this my button. HMMM button. I use that a lot. And we will click back off of that. And now if I double click this, it already calls it button. That is preferable to what I did here. Name them as soon as you drop an object on the form, give it an appropriate name using good naming conventions. And again, repeat, what are good naming conventions? Every new word in the name is capitalized, and the last word in it is what the particular control is, in this case, a button. So here we've got greeting label. This button does nothing. I'm deleting it. And we run our program, and we hello, goodbye. How about we put one more button? Now, granted, I can run this program and I can exit it by clicking on this exit, but if we create this as an executable program, that might not be an option for people. So what we could do is put another button on, and we typically do this for all programs that we'll be creating in this semester. Let's go ahead and just put a button on to exit. So I'm just going to put another button on, and now I'm going to use my good habits. I think I'll still go ahead and put this font to 22. But I'm going to use my good habits now and give this an appropriate name. I'm going to call this, first I guess I'll call it text exit. That's its text, not its name. So that's exit, or you could put N there. But I'm going to name it something appropriate. Exit button. And now when I double click, good, there it is, exit button. What do I want to do here? End. Now notice it made that blue. It understands, when it's in blue, it's like, I understand what you're talking about here. I understand that's like a specific command. When it's in black, that's something that should be on the form. When it's in red, that's text you're inserting. You'll get used to some of those things. But anyway, let's try that. So run. Welcome. I can go to farewell, greetings, farewell, exit, done. Okay. Now, last thing I want to talk about, good programming, and this is one that some people just wait until they're done with their program and do, but good programming requires what are called comments. And for your comments, underneath where your form starts, if you put an apostrophe, everything after here is going to be green. And I'm just going to put Mr. Hearn. I'm going to go apostrophe and today's date, and what will this be? This will be, you'll be viewing this on 8/0/17. Let's see, 18, 19, 20. 8. If you're looking in 2014 at this program, I'm going to put the date I created it, and this is just, I'm going to call it sample program. And then we also would typically put in comments. Now understand, sometimes a button there might be 100 lines of code associated with. There's pretty much one line of code for each of these. This is just dead code. We're not using the button anymore. So I'm not going to put comments in there, but typically the rule would be you have to have at least a comment for a new, like for instance this. Exit the program. I mean, that's almost kind of a duh statement. Obviously, this end, that's what it's doing. Obviously, our greeting label is getting changed. But it should be very easy to come in and just look at the code and have a good idea what the form looks like. Oh, I know there's a button on it that when I click it, it changes. Oh, I know there's a label on it that becomes hello. I know there's a second button that when I click it makes that same label goodbye. I know there's another button that when I click it, it exits the program. Okay? All right. This is huge. Hope you're listening closely to this one. Hope you're listening closely all the time. But when you save a program, can be a little tricky, and this causes more people wasted time in this course than any other thing. Follow these directions closely when you're saving for the first time. File. I'm going to save all. See, I got some different save objects. I'm going to save all, not just my form, not just my code. I'm going to save all, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call this sample program. Now, I'm going to save it to, a lot of times you'll have to browse here, but mine is directed right where I want it, right to Visual Basic Chapter 1. And I'm going to save. And you might be surprised what happens next. What often happens next when you click that, if you haven't created the program already, which I had, it will ask you to save another portion of it again, and you just save it in the same place. Once you do that, if you make a change, you can hit Control S and you can just go File, Save All, and it'll just save automatically. But the first time through, oftentimes you have to go through a process. When you do Save All, the very first time you save a program, you're going to have to save two different items in there, and you'll see that happen. So let's see what happens here. If I go File, Close, and let's go File, Open Project, and I go into, well, I could open Space Invaders here, but let's go back to desktop. Let's go back to my Visual Basic folder. Let's go back to Chapter 1. Here's my sample program, and there's my sample program's code. And I open that. Might give me a warning here because it thinks it's still open. Nope, it's open. Okay, so here's my form. Here's my code. I'm going to look at my form. There it is. Here's my code. It's all still there. And that should pretty well get us started. If you've gone through this, you should be pretty well along the line to be able to start in the Chapter 1 assignments. So thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you got something out of this. Again, this will be available on the website, so you can come back and review this at any time. Thank you very much.